When I first got into running workshops and retreats, you know, I mean, this is going back like 8 years-ish ago. So this would have been like 2017, 2016, right in that time frame. Um, the catchword was healing. And so I dove into what the etymology of healing is. And what it means is a return to wholeness, or like a remembrance of wholeness. And that was really interesting to me because I wanted to understand better, like, what are we really trying to heal, and what is that healing process? How do you return to wholeness, and how do you understand wholeness? And like everything else, truth is hidden in paradoxes. And sometimes the best way to learn is apophatically. To learn something apophatically means I have to understand what it is not to be able to start to understand what it is. Right? If I could understand one side of the coin, then I could make some fair assumptions and understandings and clarity around what it is. So that's what I want to talk about today. The opposite of wholeness is trauma, because if it's whole, it has all of its parts. Trauma means that it is separated from the parts, or separated from the wholeness. So when you heal, you put it back together. And it's impossible to avoid trauma. And that's just because the earth experience begins with our wholeness. And we've talked about this in some of the videos before. It's like when you were a baby, you were innately whole. And you've held babies in your arms, and you know that there's nothing flawed and nothing wrong with them. But then we start to experience the emotional woundings from the magical thinking, and having to leave the magical Eden. And those leave us with the perception that we are worth abandoning. We are worth being abandoned, worth rejecting. Now, if we're exposed to that for longer periods of time, then what ends up happening is that we take on that perception as a core belief. But perceptions can be edited, and core beliefs can be shifted. So like we've done in some of the other videos, like you've got your core wounded beliefs and you've got your core empowered beliefs, and you have both of them. But when we have experiences that have left us feeling abandoned, betrayed, rejected, misused, or abused, despised, meaning I don't matter, then there's deep emotional pain that comes from that. And emotional pain is the great awakener. So when we're trying to shift our consciousness, what we're trying to awaken to is these perceptions that are in our subconscious, as well as the core beliefs that are tied to these perceptions. That's when the wound is getting triggered, right? It's painful, and that pain is what will awaken us, because if the pain gets significant enough, then we will have to find solutions for it. So let me just read a couple of things. Trauma is an inner injury, a lasting rupture, or a split within the self due to difficult or hurtful events that occurred, where we made that hurtful event mean something about our sense of self. It's not the event, it's what was left inside after the event. By this definition, trauma is primarily what happens within someone as a result of the difficult or the hurtful events that have befallen them. It's not that event itself. And trauma, what experts call a psychic injury. Now, psyche, the Greek word for psyche means soul. And so it's not just the mind, but it's the mind and the body and the soul. Well, the mind and the body combined together is what many like philosophers have described as the soul. So this is where we get the word psychiatry or psychiatrist. They're essentially those who understand the mind, body, spirit, heart, and the soul of the person. And when we go to see a psychologist, it's somebody who has studied the science of the soul. Now, arguable how well you could actually help somebody heal if you don't understand those components, which is like we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So you have to have a spirituality and a spiritual understanding. Again, the people that I like and highly recommend: A.H. Almas, Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, Richard Rohr, Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu. I love the Hui Ching. I love the Tao Te Ching. Those are really, really great principles that that I think help us piece the soul together. And the Tao Te Ching is a great example. A chapter is like a couple of sentences long. So the book might have like 70 some odd chapters, but you could technically read the book really quickly. However, you could also read a sentence and sit on that for a couple of months. So it's more of a book of contemplation, because you're trying to move from a dualistic way of thinking to a non-dualistic way of allowing or accepting, seeing both perspectives. Even though both perspectives can be diametrically opposed of each other, they perception is reality, so therefore they're both simultaneously true, and that lowercase t true, right? And we talked about that in the previous video. Trauma, until we work it through, keeps us stuck in the past, robbing us of the present moment, limiting who we can be by impelling us to suppress hurt or suppress unwanted parts. I have parts that I judge about myself. And those are in my psyche. And then that fragments the soul, because the soul is all of it. And so when I have parts of myself that I judge, well, then there's a little part that gets broken off, and now I've just fragmented myself. And that's essentially the definition of trauma. So this is what Peter Levine said: is trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside of us in the absence of an empathetic witness. Couple of experts that align with this way of thinking: Dr. Nicole LePera, she's known as the holistic psychologist. Of course, Peter Levine came up with that. Gabor Maté, Bessel van der Kolk is another expert who agrees that trauma is not the event that happened. It happened is what we made it mean about ourselves. Couple of book recommendations: The Body Keeps the Score, How to Do the Work by Nicole LePera, The Myth of Normal by Gabor Maté, Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma by Peter Levine, Live the Best Story of Your Life by Bob Litwin, and Trauma and Recovery by Judith Lewis Herman. Some really, really great principles in those books, in the science and the research. If you can imagine, and I've got this in the chart, and you'll the title of this video is correlated to the title in the PDF section. And in the PDF section, you will see the presentation, and I've got this presentation that's designed. Essentially, imagine a T-chart, and the T-chart it says what is the opposite of trauma at the top, and it says wholeness, and wholeness is the opposite of trauma. Because if trauma is the wound, right, that pulled you apart from your wholeness, well, then the conceptual opposite of that obviously is the whole parts. So trauma fragments the psyche. This is on one side of it. It fragments the psyche into various parts, falsely believing that we are broken, not enough, all those core wounded beliefs. Wholeness, on the other side, is the unifying acceptance of all of our parts that we naturally or unconsciously judge, realizing that we are complete as we are. So you have trauma, and you're fragmented, and then you're also whole simultaneously, even though those two things diametrically seem to be opposed of each other. The spiritual belief that can wrap this up generally is referred to as like non-dualism, non-duality, not two things. Whereas in dualistic thinking, we have, I'm either traumatized and fragmented or I'm whole. And what happens a lot of times is that we try to make this go away so that we can then have this. But actually it's giving permission for this to exist and that be a part of our wholeness. So what got fragmented and pulled away, we actually just invite it to come back in. And that means that, well, you're still going to have all your fucked up shit and everything else is all, ugh, right? And you're still whole and you're complete. Now, how do you heal that? Well, this is Carl Jung. You have to, what we all have to do is go down the journey of awakening ourselves to the things that we are asleep to. And if we remain asleep, then life will happen and we will be confused by it. So his actual quote is, "You must make the unconscious conscious, otherwise life will happen to you and you will call it fate." And that's because life's not happening for you, because in dualistic thinking, we're judging this thing that happened. And Tolkien, J.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, he has a great word called the Eucharist. And essentially what it means is that it's the good catastrophe. So the shit can become fertilizer that grows new things. And that's what happens in the healing process. We don't make the past go away. The event can never, like we can't hop in the DeLorean and then go back in time with Michael J. Fox and make it go away or change anything. So how could you be whole without going into the past? And that is because it must be a Eucharist where it actually was the thing that happened to you is actually the thing that happened for you. And we'll, discuss that and get into the nitty gritty. This is philosophy. And so this can only go so far. You can't remember you can't have enough. The intellectual awareness is not enough to liberate us from the wounds and the core beliefs that are residing in our subconscious. So we have to have somatic experiences that directly contradict that fragmented or those parts that we reject, so that we can have it modeled to us and have a somatic experience within us that shows us our wholeness, even though nothing has actually changed. So that happens when our perspective shift. And the next, little video that I'll make is on perceptions and how to shift those. Healing is the process of restoring the fragmented self back to wholeness. That just happens through perception. Perception is the way to be able to shift that. So hope this video makes sense. Any questions that you have, write it in the comment box or just bring it up in our session and we'll chat with you soon.